What's up, and welcome to Clarity for Parents of Athletes, bringing you stories from professional athletes about their parents and how they were raised. My name is Gabe Nosair from aclearmind.com. I find that instead of trying to describe who former Canadian women's national soccer team player Andrea Neil is to soccer people or anybody really who hasn't heard her name before, I find it's easier to categorize her in the same group of U.S. women's soccer players that many people have heard of. To me, she's in the same generation as Michelle Akers, Mia Hamm, Julie Foudy, Brandi Chastain. Those were U.S. soccer legends who were on the national team for many, many years and had an incredible influence on many, many young soccer players, especially young girls. They motivated young players to want to play soccer to get better and achieve playing at the highest level. Andrea Neil is the same way in Canada. She spent 18 years on the Canadian women's national team. She influenced many youth soccer athletes to play the sport. She was an idol to many young Canadians, including some are on the national team today, which you'll hear about in this interview. But she wasn't always a soccer player. That's one of the amazing pieces to her story. She started out in another sport, and her journey of her athletic career is an incredible story. As always, we will hear what her parents did while raising her while she was on her athletic path and the influence they had on her, as well as how she intends to raise her child as an athlete, if that's what he chooses. Now, just as in all my interviews, or with all my interviews, make sure and listen to the end for my takeaways, where I tie in together my work and dig a little bit deeper into the biggest takeaways that I got from the interview. This is broken down into two separate parts. This interview is for those of you who want a little bit shorter segments. So there is part one and part two. All right, enjoy. Yeah, so Andrea Neil, you and I met up in Pemberton, Canada last summer at Jay Demerit's camp. Jay Demerit, a former U.S. men's national soccer team player, who has a really unique soccer camp called Rise and Shine up there. And I was lucky enough to be one of the mentors. It's a mentor camp and a soccer camp all put together. So I was lucky enough to be invited by Jay to be a mentor up there, and you were there for the soccer side. Mm-hmm. And, I got to know you pretty well, and I got to spend a lot of time with your husband, Peter, and your son, Jackson. And we spent a lot of breakfast together while you were off coaching, and the more I spoke with Peter, I think the last day I said, Andrea seems to be a legend of Canada women's soccer, and he looked at me and he nodded his head and he said, "Oh yeah, absolutely." And knowing you, I know you don't like to brag about yourself, but I would like for you to open up, if you could, and brag about yourself a little bit, about your soccer career first. I know that wasn't your only sporting career, but, I want to hear your experiences on the national team. Don't hold back. All the good stuff.
All the nitty gritty. Well, thank you for this opportunity, and I guess thank you to Jay, who connected a lot of people at that point. So they, in knowing you and your wife Angie now, I feel very much like the family expands. So thank you to Jay there, and thank you for your openness at just communicating and being a friend almost instantaneously.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt a very strong soul connection with you. It was pretty unique and amazing.
Yeah, yes. So soccer, yes, it's not always the most comfortable thing, I think, for myself. But I understand the power of story. And this was the way that people conveyed a lot of messages in the past and still do. Now it comes in the forms often of tweets and Twitter segments and little Instagram photos, but there's a story to be said, and hopefully I can share some of my experiences. And I think experiences alone, say through sport or in life, don't give us instantaneous wisdom. It's our reflections back on those experiences. So, as I tell the story today, or the small fragment of the iceberg today, it comes upon, decades now of reflection backwards that has allowed me to look at things from a different perspective. Then when you're just an athlete, the perspective is very almost narrow and very, at times, well, often, let's put it that way, very self-focused. And now I have a different perspective on the power of sport, and the tool that it really can be to enrich many wonderful human qualities. It's experiential and practice on a day-to-day basis. So let me go back to the womb.
Let's go way back. We have time, so we're flexible here. To the womb we go.
To the womb we go. Anyways, so I was born with dislocated hips, and it's an interesting one. So a breech birth from my mom, and the doctors at that point, and my parents didn't know that my hips were dislocated. And it wasn't till many weeks later where they figured that out, and was in a half body cast from the waist down, and sort of slinged on an angle with my head downwards for many weeks on end.
Wow.
And the doctors at that point informed my parents that, your daughter is never really going to run properly, that this is going to be a life impacting situation. And so here's a reflection right off the bat, that I didn't actually think anything of that. I just knew I had hip problems that I felt when I was an early teen. But I love to move. I love to be active, and I love to be very athletic. But it was just something as an athlete, I thought, okay, I just have to sort of deal with and move on, that this is probably normal, what everybody else felt. But here's the reflection now at retiring and looking back at the impact that people have on each of our lives, because we're all leaving impacts on each other and the words and the actions that we choose. Anyways, the fact that, with the statement, your daughter will never run properly, my parents had a choice. And I think back on how differently my life would have turned out if they had taken that statement and been very timid about it, or overly cautious, or, no, you can't run, and just reinforce that. And instead, my parents chose a path of just move and be a kid and fall down. And it was never discussed until, eventually I had to go see different specialists, etc. And so I think that gift of opportunity was just such an amazing thing, at the way that they managed that situation at such a young age, and how differently my life would have changed its course if I hadn't been given that environment to just move. So I feel very blessed with just their approach in life. But I was always a kid that just innately wanted to move. So I was into all sorts of, when I say sports, it's just activities. If it's, digging, doing the renovation in the backyard, to expand our house, and being involved in digging in the backyard, or, my dad was a baseball player, and just throwing, I remember hours on end throwing a baseball back and forth with my dad. And here's another situation this is a dad throwing a ball with the young girl,
Right.
with his young girl, which back then there were different avenues that quite often boys and girls would take with regards to sports, and just the again, openness that my parents had, would just go out there and move, and just that bond to connect with each other without saying in each other, but just moving with each other. It's this dance that you get to play through the activity of just physical movement. And so I was drawn to sports, but the main sport I actually played or participated in when growing up was the sport of badminton, not soccer, not, well, baseball was something that I did in the summers, but badminton was something that was year round for me. So it's so paradoxical how you end up playing a team sport like soccer. And this was, you do have a team. It's always about a team, but it's quite often just you and a partner, or you as a singles opponent against another opponent. But that was the sport that I thought, okay, I'm going to grow up and go off to world championships and all Englands and eventually the Olympics when it became a sport in the Olympics. But definitely soccer was probably the least of my choices.
That's crazy to hear considering how far you went in soccer.
Well, and here is how I ended up in soccer. It's by accident and with a bit of vanity. So I'll explain that. So badminton was always something that I would sort of shuffle to after participating in school basketball, school volleyball, and then I go to my badminton training. And again, soccer was not that thought, but eventually I had joined a team, and within that team there were some higher level players, and in fact this was an interesting one because I grew the most as a soccer player within the environment that I played with younger players, not older players, not even the same age, but younger players. And it was that team that really gave me the opportunity because there was an age group that merged. So our team was kind of never, prior to this, a team that ever had really enough players, and maybe we get minimum players, and most of the players were off, skiing on different weekends. And so the team that I had sort of grown up playing soccer on was not very competitive and not very committed in that way. So this younger team that was always the team that went and waxed us whenever we would play against them within our club. There was an age group that merged. And so I got an opportunity. They asked me to participate on that team. So once again, the word of opportunity, that when you're with these like-minded players and like-minded, it's not just about the team within the players, but the staff was just this different level of commitment and enthusiasm and higher level technicians as coaches and support staff that I grew within 1 year, so much so that I didn't even know a provincial team existed. So that's like a state team.
Right.
And then I saw these really great polyester jackets that said British Columbia on them. And I thought, oh, I want one of those jackets. And so I said to, I think a staff member at that point, coach, how do you get one of those jackets? Well, you have to, try out for a provincial team. And I thought, oh, okay, maybe I'll just try out. And lo and behold, thank goodness that the coaches at that point just saw somebody as sort of a green athlete, not necessarily a soccer player, but somebody who was, a good project to participate on the team, and made that provincial team. And here's the story behind it. Why I say vanity is they were in that particular year, the ugliest polyester jackets that you can imagine. And that was sort of our kit that year for the provincial team when I did make the team. So, when you get pulled by your wants, they're never as satisfying as you originally thought.
Yeah, of course. Polyester. I had an experience with polyester, long sleeve polyester in August in Albuquerque. It was pretty rough.
Oh, yes. I was so happy at the end of my career to just shelve anything polyester, because that's the reason way back when was the material of elite athletes.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
It built legends. It's what made people tough. Polyester.
Abrasive.
How old were you around this time?
So this was 17 years old. And and with this, so that opportunity also that this group of people allowed me to participate in, meant that when you make a provincial team just after that, then you get scouted by, or you're under the eye of national team coaches. And so in the very same year, joining a younger team, to making a provincial team, to making a national team, or not making a national team, but getting identified by the national team by age sort of 18, was a big year for the sport of soccer. And now I'm in the soccer environment in addition to the badminton environment, and trying to manage both of those at a higher level, because badminton has sort of gotten to the point where now you're competing nationally, and that's at the youth level, junior national level. So there's sort of the under 19 and under 16 age groups, and it happened where I was also, the birth ages helped me as well. Just participate quite often as an older player with slightly younger players, which we all know the relative age effect has an impact.
Right.
Anyways, so my first experience with the national team was the next year. And I first got sent home after a week-long camp that we had competed as a provincial team, and then the national team coach pulled us into a national team environment to do some continued training afterwards. I thought, what the heck? I'm so glad he's giving me the pink slip and sending me home after this, because soccer was not something that, especially at that level, and that was not an enjoyable experience, probably because I was not trained. I was trained as a badminton player, and you're talking about different athletic energy systems and different movements, and combative versus a nice net separating people. So having said that, he sent me my pink slip for that particular camp and said, if you want to continue as a soccer player, then you need to kind of quit badminton and commit to soccer. And on the other side, I was just graduating now. I'm now 19 years old and off to university and graduating from the junior ranks of national badminton. And they said, if you want to continue, you must basically quit other sports and commit to badminton. So I had this little mini midlife crisis when I was 20 years old, and I didn't know what to do. So I felt drawn to just follow a vision from childhood. And that was to go away. This is my mini midlife crisis. To go away on a tall ship. So the big wooden tall ships from yesteryear, many sort of hundreds of years ago, and travel abroad, offshore. And, I got accepted, and they saw on my letter, I guess they were desperate for staff members as opposed to trainee. I was applying for a trainee position for 18 to 25-year-olds. And they saw that I was an assistant cook up at a kids camp when I was younger for a summer, or maybe even just a few weeks. And they must have been so desperate that, come and be a co-cook on board. I thought, that meant when I said I was an assistant cook up at camp, it meant I was mixing peach drink and cutting carrots.
So you embellished your resume, basically.
Well, that was the role, but that was as far as it went at that point. So anyways, point being is I'm now had this little mini midlife crisis, and now thrust into something that was an incredibly impactful job for me, which was I'm 20 years old now and just finished my first year of university, and I'm a co-cook, which meant I was responsible for 31 members, feeding them on an offshore, sailing excursion.
Wow.
And, just to put this, at some points during the trips, you're talking 10 days, 2 weeks, and we saw one bird, that kind of open ocean.
Wow.
Experiences.
Isolation.
Yes. Well, and food becoming the only, one of the main sources of entertainment for people.
Right.
I felt high pressure job at that age. and you're dealing with multiple multitasking and different dietary needs and learning how to bake bread and actually cook, as in addition to being away from home for this period of time and being on a sailing vessel for this period of time. So this was a very eye-opening and difficult experience, because you're in a enclosed space with many different people, and you hear everything on a boat, and that's an interesting one. And of course, cooking when the seas are very rough is a very a demanding thing. And in fact, we just had a reunion. It's called the Pacific Swift, sail and life training out of Victoria, and we just had I think it was like a 30-year or 20-year reunion a few weeks ago, and just to talk to other members, and they said, well, what would you do? And I said, oh, I was a cook. And they're just like, wow. I guess I didn't realize how wow it was until after the fact, meaning it's demanding. Or bumping into another cook who was on a different leg of the trip, and she just said, she was joking, but she says, yeah, I'm still in therapy. Now, she was joking.
Yeah.
But it was one of those life changing situations. So here's where I say back to soccer and sports, where I chose soccer by accident, is that we had my friend and I, who was the bosun, and now I'm a trainee. So I finished my cooking role, and he said, let's rent motorcycles in the Dominican Republic. And so we spent the day traveling beautiful Dominican Republic at this point by motorcycle, had a tremendous day. But on the way back, the roads are not as great as they are in El Paso or, wherever you are in the world. It is, we hit a lump or a bump in the roads from sort of gravel to cement to gravel. And the steering column just wrenched to the side of the handlebars as I was on the back. And so the first thing to sort of hit the ground as we were going 60 kilometers per hour, I don't know what that translates to miles. It's fairly fast, wearing flip-flops and shorts and tank top and no helmet.
Wow. Yeah, don't do that, especially if you're a hopeful Olympian in badminton or soccer.
Well, and there was actually a thing in our contracts later on that said, thou shalt not. I don't know if that had anything to do with this, but anyways, so the whole right hand side of my body sort of hit the ground at 60 kilometers per hour, and road rash and open wounds. And then but my knee hit, and right knee from one side of the knee to the other side of the knee opened up. So it was, my first thought was, wow, this is a great anatomy lesson.
You get to see what's on the inside there.
And what's on the inside. And then I'm like, second thing is, oh no, I don't want my parents to worry. And then third thing was, oops. And what are we going to do now? So it was a desolate road. And then all of a sudden, dozens of people were there. So I don't know, it's like they're waiting for an accident to happen, but there was nobody. And then everybody, it seemed, in that little community, and motorcycles went in to the back of a pickup truck, and then we got hoisted into the back of the pickup truck as well. And Spanish to English, I was trying to say, take us in the direction of the boat, and they took us in the opposite direction to the doctor. It was a little one room, sort of very small hospital, and bars on the window, kids yelling from the outside into the room, and someone else was just in the room prior to me, and they were using the same tools, like different, you could see his blood, and now they were going to be using it on me. And so bleach obviously was the choice. But I got separated from my friend Stephen at this point, so he got sutured up in a different room, and then I was getting sutured up in one, and it was just a surreal from what I can remember. The iodine was poured on the knee and didn't give me any warning, just there, just screaming out, thinking, wow, there was no stitches that apparently no stitches. I had to give them money in order to pay to stitch up my knee. And the police officer was saying, I want your necklace, gold necklace, and making sexual innuendos. And long story short, eventually it was stitched up, but with dirt and gravel in my knee.
Ugh.
And yeah, it was an experience.
I'd say, jeez.
And the reason that I say I fell into soccer by accident was, here's another reflection, that things, when you go through experiences such as this, that things seem so cloudy before. What should I do? Which direction should I go? Became very crystal clear at that moment, or very soon after, when I became a bit more lucid. That if I were to be able to get back, that I loved the sport of soccer. I loved being connected with other people, and I loved the challenge of just kicking this little round ball on a rectangle into another rectangle. But it was more of that sense of doing something in a community beyond just ourselves. And I felt a great deal of joy in that. And that if I could get back from that, that's the direction that I knew I would like to go. And so, when I look back, I realize that so often in life we mislabel things, that we say, oh, that's such a bad thing that happened, or that's such a great thing that happened. And yet we don't have the context to really say whether or not something is good or bad, because this was one of the best things that could have happened to me, even though it seemed like one of the worst things. Because I did come back up to Vancouver afterwards, after 3 days they shipped me into a hospital there and actually put a cast on my laceration, which was even worse. So,
oh man.
So that I couldn't bend my knee, and then got sort of shipped back all day long back to Vancouver. That's what it felt like, was I was getting shipped around. But I ended up getting the infection causing gangrene. So now it's not just, abrasions and a laceration, but something that's life-threatening or limb-threatening. And when they came up here, I'm very fortunate that when I finally did get into the hospital, and it was misdiagnosed by a doctor here, because you wouldn't actually think that dirt and gravel was still in the knee.
Logically, yeah.
That, when they figured that out, they said if it had gotten just hours away at this point into the joint capsule, or less time, then you're talking about, cutting a leg off versus just taking some of the gastrocnemius or some of the dead or necrotic tissue. So I felt, again, these points where you think, oh, that's a really bad thing, yet it makes you, or it slaps reality that life is a very precious thing. So realizing that instantaneously, and having such clarity around that, to, what we choose to do in life should, help us grow as people and bring us joy, or opening for joy and happiness. And, even from the context of how was I treating my teammates? Well, there was gossip going on. There was, not always welcoming people into the locker room, and all the different things that within the social and emotional context of sport goes on beyond the rectangle lines that we play on. So it just, helped to wake me up to think, okay, you need to treat people better, because life is precious. And then even from an academic standpoint, where I was just kind of coasting through university at that point, you think, wow, what this God-given intelligence, or this mind that we have, and I'm just wasting it mechanically or unconsciously, thinking, you don't really need to apply yourself, because you're here as an athlete or for the social. You don't need to apply yourself within your courses, and how erroneous that was to think in that way, and just how that flipped a switch within me to say, use your brain, use your mind, but it's going to take effort to go out there and learn certain things. So I feel very blessed by this incident that has taken a bit to unfold from the womb to now a motorcycle accident to why I ended up sort of committing a big chunk of my life to soccer.
Yeah, and it's amazing, amazing story first of all. But it's interesting, you know. I do a lot of my physical work with my clients based on the work of Louise Hay, who connected different ailments and injuries to emotional thought patterns. And I mean, you almost lost your knee, and the knee is related to inflexible thinking and ego.
Mhm.
And during this time in your life, you had a major shift operating from ego in sport to love in sport. You mentioned it, loving your teammates and competing and training and doing your best basically, which whenever you do your best, it's always out of love.
Right. And it was just the beginning of just the veil getting pulled back a little bit because it took, a few years later and, coming across both parents, well, my mom first that had a terminal illness and cancer, and then passing away, and just also sport can be very egoic because you've got so much pain that you can come and people say, oh, just go let off steam through sport. No, you can also impact others by being really frustrated at them because you're frustrated or in mourning or whatever that is, and you can have that pent up anger that now gets spilled out towards other people, and realizing again many years later that sometimes it's these pains that do happen, that help to open us up more towards, this is not the point. If I'm kicking the ball around and I'm angry or I'm frustrated or I'm hurt, it's not going to help myself or the community at large. So that's an interesting one about the knee, because it
Yeah.
was that first sort of wake up call that say, there's very clear direction, that a path we can embark upon, and without realizing it, but just taking a step on that path, um, yeah, did change my life.
Yeah, the body always has a way of saying, "Hey, wake up, I'm talking to you for a reason. You're feeling this way for a reason." So I feel really lucky to have come across Louise Hay's work, because so much. I mean, I don't think there's been one wrong instance in something that I've experienced, some kind of pain or ailment, or something that one of my clients has experienced as well. It's really incredible stuff.
Well, and it's, and as I learn more and more, just in life, it's it's an opportunity to change and address things. So this sort of innate intelligence that we have within us, that, say, as an athlete, I spent 99% of my career pushing down all that I was feeling from a physical sense, emotional sense, psychological sense, energetic sense, and it's going to have a consequence. But as an athlete, if your target is that medal, which I can talk a little bit later about what I think the purpose of sport is, but if it is about the wins and the losses and the medals, and then you're going to not listen in general, and you're just going to keep patching yourself up and up and up, and then eventually when you do finish, if you don't finish early because of it, but eventually when you do finish, there will be an unfolding and there are going to be consequences. So I know that I definitely feel, okay, it's natural to age. This is our natural process, but many of the decisions that I made, as an athlete for those 18 plus years, come at a consequence.
Yeah, the purpose of sport. And I focus on this in my work, and you heard in my workshop that I did up in Pemberton. It's the outside in mentality. So many people focus on the outcome of winning and medals, like you said, and that feeling of importance based on sport, but it's really becomes unfulfilling, because that fulfillment can only come from the inside, which is basically the journey of sports.
Hmm. And when you actually, like, for I will constantly ask athletes if they just retire. So this can be high level, this can be, um, well, everybody's high level in their own right if they're trying to do their best. It doesn't matter really at what level it is, but anybody who's about to just finish or finished as an athlete, how do you feel at this point? There, and this can be for Olympians that win the gold medal or World Cup athletes that you know finish first in a competition. There's a lot of disillusionment, disappointment, depression amongst people to say, was that it? And that's what you call the outside in. When the quest is these external variables, but this is very much what our society is all about. But it can be not just in finishing with the prize within sport. It can be the big bank account or the beauty or the Facebook friends or whatever different box you want to tick. If that is the quest, there inevitably, once you arrive there, the pleasure of that moment will be gone almost instantaneously. And so we actually misfire so often, but yet society really tries to reinforce, this is the way to happiness, and it's an illusion.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's rampant in so many different areas within sports and just in regular life, social media, entertainment, it's everywhere.
Feeding
But
into qualities that we all have. It's just what seeds do we choose to water every day of our lives, from a moment to moment basis, are things that are not going to actually lead us to fulfillment or something that's going to give us this deep, meaningful sense of connection and gratitude and a deeper sense of gratification.
right. So this awakening that you had is really amazing, and I feel like you had a foundation where once you had this experience, your foundation came back. And I firmly believe that our foundation is based on the programming that we receive from the people closest to us when we're children.
Mhm.
And when you were born with dislocated hips and your parents made a conscious decision to not basically tell you and to let you just go on with your journey, seem to have kept you going throughout your life, that theme of the journey. Now, how did your parents, I mean, did they, I know they didn't even speak to you that you even had dislocated hips until you were older in your teens, I believe you told me. But did they ever tell you their experience when they came to that decision to not tell you?
And I don't have the opportunity to ask them anymore because my mom passed away when I was 24 years old, and then my
Mhm.
dad got cancer just after my mom passed away, and then he passed away when I was in my early 30s. And so there's so many questions now that I can see now that I'm a parent, for one,
Mhm.
now that I've spent a lot of time reflecting and continuing to reflect because it's a never ending. I mean, the quest is for all of us to wake up more,
Mhm.
and to see things with new vision. But I wish I could have a conversation now,
Mhm.
that they. But I can also look back and say, never. I think they said once when I was competing at a nationals, and I think it was an under 19 competition. And I think I had just finished, it was like myself and another athlete for second place in our country. And I lost. And I think they had something, my mom said something that wasn't positive. And, and it was a very small comment. And that was it. That's all I remember. So not that was a negative thing, but what I'm saying is the positive thing of course, within each and every human being, there is the, the choice that we make. Do you just want to give your opinion that quite often is not going to help that other human being?
Right.
I just remember that once. So in remembering that once, the reverse is that I just knew that they provided they never really said anything. It was just at the end of the day, it was a cold soccer day, and you're playing in cold rain, and they watched on the sideline that whole time with their umbrellas and their gum boots, and were the first ones to peel off shin pads and boots and, not say really anything other than, let's go get you warmed up, or good job today, or good effort. And that's that's the environment. And I wish I could say, I just know as a parent that we're constantly given the opportunity to make those decisions in life. Is, what I'm going to say to my child, you know correct, for truthful. When I say correct, true is what I'm going to say to my child, kind, and is what I'm going to say to my child useful to them. And having those, if we could all go through that, and we slip up all the time, but if we could go through that decision making before we even speak, how different again that we could change the course of people's lives around us and our own, by just making three simple decisions before we speak.
Right. That takes slowing down. And in this society, everything is light speed these days, and it's getting faster and faster with technology to where you rarely just slow down and are focused on what you're doing in the moment. We're always have something else on our minds, or even if it's on the conscious level or if it's something on the unconscious, it's always on our mind, and it causes us to just react instead of slow down and to think about those questions that you just stated.
Right, and it's mechanical, and so we're acting mechanically because we're so distracted, we're so preoccupied, we're multitasking up the, and that is within our society very much, well, that's a multitasking mother, good for her, she's able to work and raise children and, still have fitness and still, da, 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 da. But yet, how well can we really do things, when we're trying to balance off all of that? It's not possible, because we're going to be very mechanical in what we do, and when we're mechanical, that's when our past conditioning comes out, and basically the things that we're going to slip up on, that is going to no doubt cause conflict. And and we don't want more conflict in our lives. You open up the newspapers or you listen to conversations, there's a lot of conflict out there.
Absolutely. Everywhere. And our media really pushes it because people want to read about it and watch it and embody it.
Yeah, it's fascinating to people because it feeds something within them that, again, there's different seeds that we can water within ourselves, seeds that are going to, lead us to more of an expanded state, loving state, as you had mentioned a while ago, something that's going to help both ourselves and our communities grow, or there's seeds that are going to, lead us to anemia, or things are still going to grow, but in what way? And I often think about organic farmers, and we've got a former teammate of mine who was supposed to be like a geoengineer from University of British Columbia, ended up spitting distance away from our house here, and they've got 5 acres that they've leased off of, um, a household here of farming land, and created, with her partner, these amazing organic vegetables.
Oh, wow.
Cultivating, and they drop these vegetables off once a week to us during the growing season, and the incredible food that is created. And I know they put blood, sweat, and tears and love, because I know them personally. Um, and they're doing it with the decision not to use pesticides or herbicides or different things. They're doing it with these practices that are sound, because they know that they want to feed the community, and so the foods are so much more nourishing just for the soul, for everything about it is an incredible thing. And I think about, just instead of it being the manufacturing model, of just creating a car, and just now everything's computerized and mechanical, and we're going to create this fast, robust car with the, whatever paradigm we're trying to achieve, to can we take life as more of the old farming model. I'm not talking about some of the farming practices that go on, day to day, but taking our time, cultivating, watching, listening to the wildlife around, accepting what the climate is. And I speak to that model when I go out and speak to different kids or groups, to say, this is not an easy model by any stretch of the imagination, but it's almost the same thing, that we've got these seeds within us to water and cultivate. And do we choose the manufacturing model, mechanistic and unconscious, in which to basically water these seeds, and who knows what it's going to create out of it? Or are we going to be much more conscious with the decisions that we make?
Yeah, and that takes slowing down, you know, um, and not mass producing. And, that goes for food, but that goes for people as well, to really focus on the uniqueness of the individual instead of mass producing athletes for some kind of benefit.
Well, and again, when you talk to those athletes that have been there, at the highest level from a global sense, that many are disillusioned when they finished. So there's always going to be an outcome from sport. There's always, in anything that we do, there's going to be an outcome. What we think is the outcome. Like I like FIFA's statement. I don't know what the governing body is called, IRB or something like that now, that our sport in soccer is governed by. But they're talking about, how do you win a game? Well, it's talking about the outcome of a match, determining the outcome of a match. And I like that statement, determining the outcome of a match, because what they're talking about is scoring one more goal than your opponent. Or within tournament play, it becomes maybe slightly different. But let's just talk in general terms. Scoring one more goal, that's what they're saying is the outcome of a match is. Yet we know that, in the way that you treat another human being, there's going to be an outcome to both yourself and to that human being and the greater community. So we have to think about what we're doing within sport in a broader context, that there is going to be an outcome. And we're really basically cultivating within the people within the sport really important human qualities that we're going to nurture with, again, a greater sense of, is it good? Is it useful in what we do, how we coach, how we apply sport? Knowing that, can we try to create better communities and support people and their growth as a whole by just approaching sport in a different way? Yes, we can still try to go, as FIFA describes it, score one more goal than the opponent, but how do we do that? How do we help support a player on the bench who is sitting there? And I know myself, I had many envious feelings within my thinking and my emotions that would say, okay, well, I hope she makes a mistake, because maybe then I'll get an opportunity. Well, this is a very toxic thing, because this line of thinking, we may think most is very mechanical. We don't even think about that inner voice we have within our minds. But this is how wars get fought, is with that level of envy. Like, somebody has something that I don't have, and then we get greedy, and then we get angry when it's not there. You can imagine that these are the little seeds that, if the circumstances were different and it's not a sporting field and we're watering these types of qualities, it's not that far to imagine that in a different country with different circumstances, that this could be something that is dangerous in a different way.
Yeah, it's always ego. I mean, that's the only thing that's really the root source of any war or any kind of fight, anything. It's pure, it's ego. That's all there is.
Right. And that can be watered as a seed on the sporting field. And that's the thing, is we have to move away from that, which means that we have to embark on a process to become more aware that it is there, and then to move towards um, things, not things, the thing that is going to help us, the antidote to that, which is acting in a much more moral and loving way towards ourselves and to each other, and know that there's something greater going on that is um, something that is going to bring us more eternal happiness, not fleeting happiness or what we think is happiness.